No? We have another powerful story.
Yeah, and in the last half hour, in case you missed it, we took you through a walkthrough of one residential school in Brantford, Ontario, called the Mohawk Institute. It is currently being renovated and preserved as a place to learn about our past, as we've heard from a number of our guests. That's so very important. I had the honor of speaking with one survivor, but before we get to that interview with Geronimo Henry, I want to show you a tobacco offering, and this is something in Indigenous culture when speaking to an elder asking for assistance or support or help. So have a look at this and I'll explain. Geronimo, I'd like to offer you this for sharing your story with us today, but because of COVID, we can't touch hands. But I'd love to, on your behalf, lay this to Mother Earth, if I can.
Yeah.
Okay, so what you're seeing here, Dee, it is loose tobacco wrapped up in a small cloth and then tied. And you're going to see me put it to the ground right by that tree on his behalf to Mother Earth. Usually, you know, you would exchange hands, right? You touch. Obviously, because of COVID-19, we can't do that. And he actually said, you know, that was exactly what we should be doing right now. And you'll notice I had it in my left hand, closest to your heart. In offering. And with that, as he accepted that offering, he was willing to share his story with us. He was so very gracious, spending hours with me as we walked the grounds of the Mohawk Institute, where he spent more than a decade. What does this structure mean to you?
It means to me like a loss of childhood, dysfunctionalness. We did a lot of crying here. We did a lot of fighting amongst each other.
November 11th, 1942, a day 83-year-old Geronimo Henry recalls very clearly. You walked through these doors at 5, 6 years old.
Yeah.
Can you take me back to that day?
We kind of like had a group hug, and of course me being the youngest was like, of course, like we were all crying and screaming, you know, like, Mom, don't leave us.
Geronimo, alongside his 3 older siblings, stood at the entrance of the Mohawk Institute Residential School in Brantford, Ontario, knowing everything was about to change.
But anyway, she left. You know, we just stood there for a moment, like as she got in this car and she went down that laneway and just out of sight.
From that point on, for the next 11 years, Geronimo no longer had a name. He became number 48, something he would later in his adulthood tattoo on his hand, alongside the word survivor, remembering the pain he lived through. He would join other Indigenous children from 6 nations. No names, just numbers.
The whole idea of these residential schools was to, you know, to assimilate us. Yeah, assimilate us into the dominant white society, I guess you could say. And the way to do that was to take our culture and our language and our beliefs away from us.
And not just that, stories of abuse, psychological, physical, sexual. For Geronimo, the days began at 6 a.m., 7 days a week, woken from his sleep by staff.
Older boys would go out into the farm. They had a big farm here. You know, eventually I got out doing that at about 7, I guess.
The work followed by a short breakfast before school, an overcooked oatmeal served every day with a glass of skim milk. If they were lucky, a slice of bread. Geronimo remembers a dump about 5 minutes away that some kids would sneak away to just to fill their stomachs, especially if they were pulled out of class to do more work on the farm.
Sometimes they would take me out of school. I think the government and the church's attitude was, well, they're just native kids, so they're not going to amount to anything.
Geronimo walks me to a brick wall at the back of the building, known to the kids to have been out of bounds. But etched in it, names and messages everywhere. He recalls a lot of crying done here. For him, it was an escape.
Fish, 1942 to 53.
The years Geronimo spent at the Mohawk Institute. And Fish, a nickname given to him by the older boys after they threw him in the water one day to teach him how to swim.
I was so scared, I guess. Like I just kind of popped up like a cork and just started swimming, kind of like about the first try. So that's kind of like how the name is. Says, look at this. Geronimo is just swimming around like a fish.
His voice to tell his story. You've been speaking a lot. You've been educating people. You continue to do that.
Yeah.
What inside of you is pushing you to do that?
Well, every time I talk, I'm talking for all the native kids that went through these schools, well, right across Canada, you know. that didn't have to, couldn't talk for themselves. Every time you tell your story, you're healed a little bit.
Isn't that something to hear? Because I was just thinking, what a remarkable human being to be, to have the courage and the strength to go through this. And he just said, every time I talk about it, it helps me heal.
And he's been back to the Mohawk Institute many times, speaking as a survivor. And it's still every time, as he says, a piece of healing. That being said, there's a lot of trauma to live through. We heard about intergenerational trauma and being able to speak out and speak up. He said when he left the Mohawk Institute, 11 years, think about that, you're 6 years old, 11 years, that's your childhood. When he left and saw his mom again, his mom eventually passed, and he didn't know how to grieve because he wasn't taught how to grieve. Yeah. And he said it just felt like he wasn't in the right place because of the assimilation, is what he was mentioning, is that he didn't know how to go back to his culture. The language he wasn't understanding as much. And it was a difficult time, and it's something he continues to struggle with, and that is why he continues to speak out.
Thank you, Mel. And we do realize, of course, some of these stories, the imagery may be triggering or traumatizing for some of you watching at home. We will be sharing these phone numbers for you to call throughout the show, so please lean on them if you need emotional support. We'll be right back here on BT with a segment on what we could do to help.